And we're going into the conversation of this hour. You know, the term coloured is quite contentious, not just here in South Africa, but across the world. We've seen, the trolling of South African superstar Tyler from the American community saying that word is wrong. But in South Africa, the word coloured is completely different from the context of anywhere else in the world. In fact, we're the only ones in the world that use it in this particular way. And this term coloured refers to people of a very mixed heritage in South Africa, a group that emerged during colonial and apartheid times. Historically, they were classified as separate racial group, distinct from both black Africans and white people. And today, the identity is still quite complex, shaped by a diverse range of cultural backgrounds, including African, Khoi, and European ancestry. So, according to a recent report, the coloured community in South Africa's Gauteng province has reported a disproportionately high feelings of insecurity, high feelings of social alienation, and economic strain compared to the general provincial averages. And there's a palpable sense that their voices are unheard and that systematic obstacles persist in denying them full inclusion in social, political, and economic life of the province. So we're unpacking the findings of the report compiled by the Gauteng City-Region Observatory. Joining us on the line is Shamsunisaa Miles-Timotheus, who is a junior researcher at the Gauteng City-Region Observatory. Shamsunisaa, thank you so much for helping us unpack this very important issue this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Benjamin and Palesa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking your time to speak to us. First, let's speak about this, coloured term. In South Africa, it is a racial group. We're the only ones in the world that have this particular racial group, but it has a lot of mixed emotions, a lot of history, and a lot of, problems that we see from this term itself, from the people themselves, the coloniality, the apartheid era. So maybe let's give some brief history on the term and its people before we go into the findings themselves.
Okay, perfect. So I think what I want to start off is by talking about the identity formation and where coloured really comes from. And I think Professor Erasmus really speaks about this in her book, where she explains that coloured identity is developed through a process that she calls creolization, which is a blending of cultures, as you mentioned, because we know we have the colonizers, we had the native people of the land, and later on we had the slaves that were also brought in. And it was the blending of these cultures that created a new culture, and it's continuously and creatively remade by coloured people, and it's a way to help them make sense of their lives, because in reality colonialists came in and they started differentiating people, and then apartheid came and institutionalized words like coloured, where we now say that, okay, we have black, we have white, and coloured is kind of everybody who doesn't fit in there. And then as things progressed and as the act amended, they then started to differentiate between different types of coloured and separated Indians out of the coloured category as well.
It's an interesting one because you're looking at it historically, and someone might say that, there were benefits that the coloured community had during the apartheid era because they were leveraged as maybe better than the black category. Do you think that kind of notion has complicated the idea of identity for the coloured community?
Definitely. There's a lot of debates going around, and I think a lot of the times we hear the words that I'm not black enough, I'm not white enough. And I think where it comes from is that during apartheid, yes, coloured people were given certain privileges, but it was really for the benefit of the apartheid government. It wasn't given to the coloured people for their benefit, and it was given to help the apartheid government. And so I think a lot of the times we don't understand that really coloured people were being used in a lot of ways.
Well, let's speak about this report compiled by yourselves as the Gauteng City-Region Observatory. What is the primary motivation behind conducting this particular research and writing the article?
So through the GCRO's survey, and I just want to quickly explain that the GCRO is a research association, which is a partnership between the University of Johannesburg, the University of the Witwatersrand, the Gauteng provincial government, and Salga Gauteng. And we do a quality of life survey every 2 to 3 years to understand what's happening in residents' lives. And when we dug into the data and we disaggregated it by population group, we saw some concerning data points. And after this, we then looked into the literature to try and see what is the literature saying about these data points. And we discovered that there's not been a lot of research into understanding the experiences of colored people, particularly within Gauteng, and a lot of the work that has been done focused on the Western Cape. So the project and the article, it really aims to fill this gap and to bring empirical evidence, the lived experience, and the history all together to explain it.
And what were the key findings that stand out for you?
It's definitely safety, because we see that 61% of people, colored people in Gauteng, feel like the crime situation in the areas in which they lived had worsened. And this is 61% compared to 48% provincially. We also see a very high number of colored people indicating that the main problem in their community is gangsterism, where 2.3% of the people identified it as an issue compared to the provincial average of 0.2. And we even see a call or a cry for help, because we asked people about protests in the area, and 17% of colored people said that the most recent protest in their area was around crime and safety, which again is higher than the provincial average.
Okay, Shamsunisaa, let's speak about some of the other things that the colored community find. I mean, they think that they've been disproportionately alienated socially here in South Africa post-apartheid, which is something that's, very important to mention, because there are pre-apartheid, post-apartheid contexts that we have to keep in mind when speaking about any racial group in South Africa. So let's speak about post-apartheid South Africa and the colored community in the Gauteng province.
Okay, so I can speak to racial discrimination. So we asked people how often they feel racially discriminated against, and 18% of colored people said they either always or often feel racially discriminated against, compared to the provincial average of 13. We also see a lot of discouraged work seekers within the colored community, which is double that of the provincial average, leading us to ask the question, but why are there more colored discouraged work seekers? We also see that they have feelings like saving money is just impossible, which is 10 percentage points higher than the provincial average. But we also see this high dissatisfaction with the post-apartheid government as well, where the dissatisfaction with provincial government and national government is 10 percentage points higher than that for the Gauteng province. We even asked people, like, do you intend to vote in the next election? And some people indicated no, and we asked why. Why do you not want to vote? And 40% of the colored people who said they're not going to vote said they don't want to vote because politics is just a waste of time, it's broken promises, and it doesn't help them in any way.
All right, let's take a quick break. Stay with us on the line. We're speaking to Shamsunisaa Miles-Timotheus, junior researcher at the Gauteng City-Region Observatory. They've just compiled research that says that the colored community in South Africa's Gauteng province feel disproportionately high feelings of insecurity, social alienation, economic strain compared to the general provincial averages. And so we'll continue to unpack this after this break.
AUSISA, the Association of Water and Sanitation Institution of South Africa, is a platform uniting Africa's water professionals. This November, Africa leads the conversation on water and sanitation. Join global and African leaders at the AUSISA Africa and Global South Dialogue 2025 from the 9th till the 12th of November at the Emperor's Palace, Johannesburg. From policy innovation, this is where action meets collaboration for a water-secure future. Register today at ausisa-watersan-dialogue.org or follow at AUSISA on social media. AUSISA, working together for sustainable water and sanitation security in Africa. Step into the heart of the day on the move with Palesa and Benjamin.
Racial segregation is something that historically characterizes South Africa as a nation. To this day, whenever you're applying for anything, right, you'll get a little form. Maybe you're applying for a loan, maybe you're applying at school, or whatever it is, any kind of application that is significant, you'll get a racial category that asks you what race are you. In South Africa, it's either black, white, or colored, and then there's this also interesting box that's called other, right? And that is something that I've always wondered, if these racial divides were something that were actually harmful for a nation, why do they also remain intact when it comes to also offering opportunities? And we're talking about a grouping in South Africa that's widely misunderstood by South Africans, but also by many outside of South Africa. That's the colored reference of people of mixed heritage in South Africa. And we're unpacking findings of a report that was compiled by the Gauteng City-Region Observatory on this one. Shamsunisaa is joining us to help us unpack a little bit more on this one. I mean, the identity issue is an issue, right? Because even the report highlights it in a very comprehensive way in terms of the cultural identities. What makes it an issue is the fact that it's very much misunderstood even in the South African context, but as we've seen even internationally, people don't understand what we also mean by the colored community in South Africa. Could you unpack a little bit about that colored identity that stood out as you reflected upon it in this report? Because I see there is an observation of that.
Yes, thank you, Benjamin. So I think I just want to emphasize what I said earlier about colored identity being developed through this process of creolization, which is the blending of cultures. So between the Dutch, the English, the slaves that were brought in, the native people of the land, so the Khoisan, and how they creatively remade a culture for themselves. But I think it's also important to identify that people will identify differently. And I think what was very interesting for me, I came out with, I'm going to highlight 3 different ways that colored people identify, but there's a lot more. Okay. And the first one is that there are colored people who identify as colored, they accept the label colored, and they believe that colored is much more than a race, that it's their culture, it's their tradition, right? And we see this in Tessa Dooms' book. But we also see that there are some people who would rather not be classified as colored, who want to be classified according to their lineage and want to be called Khoisan. And then the third one I want to highlight is that you also have people who reject race because they believe that race is this social construct and it's a biological identifier, which doesn't make sense to them because it's based on how we look, right? And they would rather be identified as Black under a political view, which is in line with your Steve Biko Black consciousness, where we refer to Black people as being anyone who was oppressed.
Mm-hmm. Shamsunisaa, this also creates a lot of dynamics because in a country like South Africa, we usually align political excess to racial definitions, right? And, you know, when you think about South Africa's history, it's always felt like, you know, you align yourself to a particular political ideology based on the color of your skin. What's happening here in the colored community?
I think it's still something that we are investigating. So we came up with the same question. And so we're going to look at the political attitudes of colored people and whether their votes has been fluid or whether their votes has changed over time. But I think the one thing we can recognize is this political dissatisfaction, that they're not happy, that they don't believe that the government who was in place looked out for them. And so it's definitely something we still need to investigate and to understand.
All right, let's speak about this is more than just a research that says this is how colored people feel, but these feelings are quite valid because everybody deserves services, everyone deserves social integration, whether back in the apartheid era and of course today, but this is is something that many people still struggle with. Based on the research that you guys did, what are the most urgent issues that require attention from the likes of policymakers and community leaders?
So I'm going to say it's the sense of feeling and safety within the communities, because if we look at Maslow's hierarchy, safety is the second most important. And the problem of gangsterism. I mean, we've read a book from Venter back in 1974, and he said 50 years ago that the main problem in the Western Township area, which is Westbury today, is gangsterism. 50 years later, guess what? We still have gangsterism. So it's safety, community, and gangsterism. But I think that before attempting to solve problems and telling policymakers what to do, it's that we have to engage with community members, and through the active participation of both community members and the people trying to solve the problem, that we find a solution together, because that empowers people, that empowers the community to help them, help you come up with a solution for them, so that we don't just implement or impose a policy like we know the apartheid government did.
Mm-hmm. So where to from here? What are the next steps? Do you have recommendations that are part of the report, and maybe next steps can be taken to identify some of these serious matters that are in this report?
Yeah, so the next steps for us is to look a little bit further. So we've used data from a survey, and a lot of the data gives us the information, it gives us the description, but it doesn't give us the nuances as to why this is happening and how we can fix it. So the next steps for us as an organization and as the project is to try and understand this in a little bit more detail, and to write a comprehensive report where we would obviously also include next steps of what could help the community.
All right, where can we find the report?
So the report you can find it on our website, but this report will only be ready by the end of next year, because we're doing a lot of groundwork and field work, and we're also trying to include the voices of the people that we are talking about.
All right. Thank you so much. Really happy to have unpacked this with you. And I think these are issues that we still have to look at quite deeply in South Africa, because they also are attached to a very painful past and, a painful present as well, as we can see through the likes of this report. But for now, thank you so much, Shamsunisaa, for joining us and helping us unpack this report. That is Shamsunisaa Miles-Timotheus, a junior researcher at the Gauteng City-Region Observatory, speaking to us about a recent report by the GCRO, speaking about the coloured community in South Africa's Gauteng province.